right, everyone. Welcome to our virtual program on African American genealogy resources. As usual, feel free to post any questions in the chat, and we will answer them either during the program or at the very end. All right. So my name is Amy. I'm a librarian here with the Plano Public Library. We have Trey here helping me out as the chat moderator. So just to get started, we're going to go over the class objectives for this class. So this class is designed to be an overview of the types of documents and records that you could look for when you're researching your ancestors. And we're also going to discuss what resources are available for you to use both in our library and from other sources for you to search for these records. This class is mainly going to focus on Texas-specific records, but there are similar sorts of sources that might be available for other states as well. And just a note on terminology. So, of course, some of the terminology used in historical records may include certain words, terms, or phrases from that time period that we might find offensive today. So, of course, we do not endorse this, but it is the historical context. So just to get started going over challenges and research tips. So if anyone else has taken or watched our other program talking about solving the mysteries of women in your family tree, a lot of the same creative thinking that goes on into finding women in your family tree also applies in general to finding African American ancestors. So if your ancestor was not a white male, it becomes a lot harder to find any type of documentation pertaining to them depending on the time period. Either that documentation was not created or available at the time, or you have to just kind of get creative and see what else you can find. So often you have to combine contracts, records, other documents clustered around a time period. Typically for African Americans, this would be the time your ancestor was emancipated to research genealogical connections. Documents not created or available at the time. So enslaved persons were considered property, not people. So certain documents that you might typically use for family history research, such as birth certificates, marriage licenses, etc., might not exist. So our first tip is to create a timeline. So you always want to start from the current time period and go backwards. So you can include major historical events that would have affected your ancestor's life. This can include laws that were passed. It can include, for example, we have the 1867 voter registration. So that was the first time that Black males of voting age in Texas were listed by first and last name. So that might be a good resource to start with during that time period. All right, so now we're going to get into the different types of records that you might find or look for. This is, again, not a complete list of all the different records you might find. These are just some common examples. So the first one would be the census. So the 1870 census was the first time that freed African Americans were counted in the census. So that might be a good place to start. There are also the 1850 and 1860 slave schedules. So during the 1850 and 1860 United States federal censuses, enslaved individuals were recorded separately in slave schedules. So these records might have information about their age, their sex, and color, but unfortunately most are going to omit personal names. This is helpful to provide circumstantial connections between the enslaved person and their enslaver, or the area to look for more documentation. So we also have military records. So we have service records, so that could include both Union and Confederate records from the Civil War. TSLAC, which is the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, which I will be referencing them often throughout this presentation because they have a lot of excellent resources and databases. So they have military reconstruction rolls. There are also adjutant general records. So these have a service records database. They include Reconstruction records and Civil War records. You can also look for pensions. So TSLAC has compiled some pension applications from African Americans who served in the Civil War. These were created after the war, and they've kind of been piecing them together, but those are also available through TSLAC. And there are also muster rolls. So TSLAC has military reconstruction rolls, which that also includes military rolls for the state police and the state guard. So that would be applicable to Texas. As far as education goes, there are different education records that might provide information about your ancestors. So we have the scholastic census. So early lists might provide information on the students that were attending schools, or they might include the head of the household. Later lists from schools might list students individually or with their family. It can include information such as their birth date, their parents' names, school, grade, race, and in some cases, if they had any disabilities. This does include African American schools. Lists that are 75 years and older are available, but newer lists often have information redacted for privacy reasons, just in case those individuals are still alive. There are also teacher certification records. So these include a teacher's address, their college of graduation, their age, and their number of years as a teacher. So this could include any ancestors that might have started teaching. It has that information. And then annual report of school funds. These also list the teachers' names and their pay rates. So now we go on to court records. So an example for marriage licenses, which the Freedmen's Bureau, which I will talk a little bit more about later, they collected marriage records. Some are available through Family Search, which is another resource that I will go in more in depth later on in the presentation. There are also tax rolls and voter registration. As I mentioned earlier, the voter registration of 1867, that was the first time African American males were listed as voters using their full names. So that could be an excellent resource as well. If you want more information on how to search court records, we do have a courthouse records class. It is recorded and also available on our YouTube page. If you want to visit our YouTube channel, we have previous recordings of courses we have done before. And just to talk about other records, these are kind of more miscellaneous. Newspapers actually have a lot of articles that have details that are not found in other places. There are also ship manifests and documentation from ports of entry. One thing to note was that in 1807, there was the act prohibiting importation of slaves, which federal law provided that no new slaves were permitted to be imported in the United States. So that took effect in 1808. So this did halt the international slave trade, but actually increased the domestic slave trade. And it helped regulate internal transportation by requiring a manifest when leaving or entering a port. So that could be another useful document to try and search for. There could also be immigration records from after the Civil War or Reconstruction period. There are also city directories, which those are kind of newer, but those might have more information, and convict ledgers and clemency records. All right. So now kind of getting into the bulk of our presentation, which is going to be talking about the resources that are available to you both through our library and through other libraries and organizations. So to start with our library, we have our Genealogy Center, where we have physical books as well as microfilm. We have a lot of books relating to African American genealogy, general books, how to research them, as well as we have books on records from specific areas. So for example, we have African American cemeteries in Hartford County, Maryland. You can search keywords and then use filters to narrow your results down to the genealogy collection. So this would be if you're able to visit our center in person. We do also have a lot of Collin County records on microfilm. So for example, we have tax rolls, voter registration, probate packets, and marriage records. We have records of the Superintendent of Education for the state of Texas, Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen and Abandoned Lands, and others. We do have some more recent, less historical newspapers that are available here, but for newspapers, it might be more helpful to search using an online database. We do have the Dallas Times Herald, which was in the late 1800s, so if your ancestor was in this area. So going on to talk about databases, there are a lot of overlap in these databases, so you might find the same records in more than one database. Ancestry is going to have the bulk of information, but through us, it is only available in person in the library. So if you can either visit the library or if you have your own personal Ancestry account, it would be an excellent resource. The other databases are Family Search, Heritage Quest, and Proquest, African American Heritage. These are all available to use at home. So going back to talk about Ancestry, it's going to include vital records, which those are birth, marriage, death records. It will have military records, wills, probates, land tax, and criminal records. It's going to have your city and area directories, newspapers, and maps, atlases, and gazetteers as well. So going on to talk about Family Search, which the links I've provided here in this PowerPoint, they do have specific collection sites if you're specifically looking for African American resources. So for example, the Family Search Wiki on African American resources for Texas is excellent. So I would highly recommend looking at that because it will provide links to other resources. Family Search has a lot of overlap with items that are on Ancestry or Heritage Quest. This is available for you to use from home, but I did want to mention that we are now a Family Search affiliate library, so you do have access to more items if you come in and use one of our computers to search. And like I mentioned, that Wiki Guide is an excellent resource, and it will link you to other areas. So talking about Heritage Quest, Heritage Quest Online has a lot of duplicates from Ancestry, as I mentioned. It includes things like the census, city directories, military records, immigration records, wills and probates, and maps. So one thing that is unique to Heritage Quest is it has the U.S. serial set, that's congressional documents starting in 1817, as well as the Freedmen's Bank records, which those were from 1865 to 1871. So those might provide a lot of good resources for you as well. And just to mention the Proquest African American Heritage, this is actually a new TextShare database that is available starting this year. It has the Afrogenius community pages. So this provides forums, chats, mailing lists, and searchable access to thousands of slave, census, death, and other records. So these are all loaded by staffers as well as site visitors. So it would be a good community if you wanted to go connect and see if there are other people who might be researching your ancestors. And these are all available through our library webpage, through our Research and Learn tab, which if anyone would like to be shown that, I can do that towards the end of the presentation. All right, and here's just some more information about Ancestry. This is the homepage, like I mentioned, that they have a guide for African American family research. And here's just an example of some of the included data collections on the right-hand side. So it's not an exhaustive list, but just an example of some of the things you can look at. And here's some information. This is kind of what the Family Search homepage looks like. You can browse collections, search for different historical records. On the right-hand side was the wiki page I had mentioned earlier about African American genealogy. They do have state pages. So if you're looking to research an ancestor who might have lived in a different state, that would be an excellent resource to see what resources are available for that particular state. And here's an example of Heritage Quest, kind of what their site looks like. On the right-hand side, this is just an example of, like I mentioned, the Freedmen's Bank records. So these are going to be scans uploaded of those bank records. And lastly, we have the Proquest, which it has collections, it has the Afrogenius community. It also has a PDF of the Black Genesis state-by-state resource guide. So that's an excellent PDF resource and compiles resources for all 50 states, Canada, and the West Indies. So this would be an excellent resource for you to look at. All right, now to get into some resources that are outside of our library. As I mentioned before, the Texas State Library and Archives Commission is an excellent resource. A lot of their information was kind of what was used to create this presentation. I highly recommend, they have done 2 webinars, which are available. You can see these YouTube links. We can paste those in the chat later. So these are webinars you can watch online that contain a lot of this information and information about resources. They also have the African American genealogy page, which highlights more resources that you can look at. So they have military records like service pensions, education records like the scholastic census I mentioned. They may not be indexed or digitized online. It might be something you would need to contact them about, but usually most places are more than willing to make copies and send them to you. The webinars, as I mentioned, explain in detail the records that they have. And then the website has a research guide and links to collections and gives you a good idea of records that could exist. There's also the Dallas Public Library Genealogical Society. They do have general meetings, which the meeting on February 4th has passed us up, but that is just an example of a type of meeting, the topic that they might have. They also have an African American genealogical interest group. So this is a hybrid meeting, so that would be virtual, but it's also in their central library, and they're held on the 3rd Saturday of each month, unless otherwise noted. So I highly recommend checking out their website to see what webinars and what meetings they have coming up. They also have a very large genealogy collection as well, if you wanted to visit their library. All right, so talking about other resources, the National Archives and Records Association, they have the Freedmen's Bureau records, as you can see pictured on the right-hand side here. The Freedmen's Bureau was instrumental in assisting African Americans during the period immediately after the Civil War. So they provided things like food, shelter, clothing, and medical services and land to displaced Southerners, including newly freed African Americans. They helped establish schools, supervised contracts between the freedmen and ex-slavers, and then managed confiscated or abandoned lands. It also helped former enslaved persons like legalize their marriages, locate lost relatives, and assisted veterans. So not all of their records are going to be indexed. So you might have to go through the specific areas that would be of interest to you and your ancestor if you already have some information about them. There's also the Tarrant County Black Historical and Genealogical Society, which we have the link to the website listed. So they're a society with the mission to research, collect, preserve, and share the genealogy and history of African American contributions in Tarrant County, Texas, and beyond. So this would be a great way to connect with others who are working on their genealogy and possibly find more resources. Their website is a little vague on what resources they have available, but it would still be something good to check out. The Library of Congress has information online. For example, they have Born in Slavery, Slave Narratives from the Federal Writers Project. That's from 1936 to 1938. It contains more than 2,300 first-person accounts of slavery and black and white photographs. So these narratives were collected in the 1930s as part of the Federal Writers Project of the Works Progress Administration. So that might also have information about particular people. All right, and as I mentioned before, newspapers are an interesting and creative resource that you can look at. Oftentimes, they had information that was not contained anywhere else. So they might have the name of the enslaved person, the name of the enslaver, their location, physical description, maybe relationship to other family members. As you can see on the right-hand side here, it has information about a particular person and where she was living at. So the Texas Runaway Slave Project, which that was done through Stephen F. Austin State University. This is a database of runaway slave advertisements, articles, and notices from newspapers published in Texas. It also contains materials from court records, manuscript collections, and books. So it can document more than 2,500 fugitive slaves from Texas. So that could be an excellent resource to look at. There's also the Southwestern Christian Advocate Lost Friends column. So this was a newspaper that was published in New Orleans that was distributed to nearly 500 preachers, 800 post offices, and more than 4,000 subscribers in the area of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Arkansas. This ran well into the first decade of the 20th century, featuring messages from individuals who were searching for their loved ones who were lost in slavery. So it has a searchable database that provides access to more than 2,500 advertisements that appeared in the Advocate between November 1879 and December 1900. So this is a project of the Historic New Orleans Collection. So that could also be an excellent resource to find some more personal information about people. And there's also Last Seen, Finding Family After Slavery. The website is informationwanted.org. So this is very similar to the Lost Friends column database. It searches African American newspapers from 1865 to 1920. The goal is to identify, digitize, transcribe, and publish ads placed in newspapers across the United States and beyond by formerly enslaved people who were searching for family members and loved ones. And lastly, there's the Portal to Texas History, which is available through the University of North Texas. So this contains 1,700 digitized newspapers. This one you would have to get a little bit more creative with, but you can still find similar articles like from the sites listed above. And here on the right is an example from the Lost Friends database. All right, so those are the resources that I had available to share. If anyone has any questions or would like for me to go hop on and explore some of these websites, we can certainly do that. If you have any more in-depth questions, please feel free to reach out to us at genealogy@plano.gov.
No questions so far, but we'll just give a few moments for somebody to finish typing and formulating their question.
All right, I see. So we have a question from Connie. How do you find your ancestors if they only started recording in 1850? So that is a bit, like I said, it is very tricky. A lot of this information is going to be more circumstantial rather than finding hard documentation. There are some records that are available from before 1850, but like we said, a lot of them are going to be kind of from that period and after. Do you have any advice for that one, Trey?
No, I don't. I've put that into a note file because that's a good question. We'll have to research that some more.
Hi, Mary. So it is going to be posted to our YouTube channel. So that would be, I believe if you just search Plano Public Library on YouTube. Let me also show you real quick.
I don't know if y'all been following in chat, but I posted that. Oops, no, I didn't. I'll do that shortly.
Right, and I can post a link here as well. So if you see the Plano Public Library website, you can hover over this library tab. Over here, we have Visit Genealogy Center, so that would be the place to go. And over here on the left-hand side, we have genealogy classes. So this is going to tell you our upcoming classes. But if you scroll down, these are all of our available courses that you can watch online. So we have quite a few on here. If you have some time and would like to learn more about specific records, it will be posted to here as well. Okay, I see Connie, you had another question. I am not sure which name they would have recorded. I would think it would be more likely that they would record the slave name, whatever, name the enslaver had perhaps given them. But I am not 100% sure on that.
And for the question on the GED file, yeah, the software, I'm looking that up. I think I remember the answer, but before I tell it wrong, I got to look it up. Bear with me.
And just since I'm already on this webpage, just to show you how to access our databases, it would be through this library tab, this research and learn tab, although you can also access it through the genealogy resources right here. So this will show you a bunch of the different online databases that are available. And it starts in Plano, and then it scrolls all the way down if you need broader databases.
And real quickly, I'm assuming the GED file, you're talking about the GEDCOM files, the genealogy. application. Is that correct? It looks like there's a number of different variety of genealogy applications that you can open that with. One's called Roots Magic for Windows or Mac, Ancestral Author, MyHeritage Family Tree Builder, and something called GeneWeb, GENE Web, which apparently is I'm not sure what they mean, cross-platform. So maybe they have an app for a smart device, possibly. But it also, and I can't vouch for these because I've not used them personally myself. I'm just finding an answer out in the wild. So there's that caveat.
So I see Mary asked, what is the best way to research when the birth certificate shows the spelling one way and there are other records with a different spelling? So unfortunately, this is very common when it comes to researching your ancestors, just different people writing down different spellings of names. The best advice that I would give for that is you would need to research all the different types of spellings. Keep a list if you have a particular ancestor or a specific last name or first name that might be spelled a couple different ways. I would write down all the variations and then search from there. Unfortunately, that's just very common with a lot of these older handwritten records. All right, well, if there are no further questions, I will go ahead and end this webinar. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. Like we said, this will be posted later on our YouTube channel, so feel free to rewatch it and ask any questions if you have them.